Hey, everybody, welcome to your Money Map, sponsored by the Alliance for Lifetime Income. I'm your host, Jean Chatzky. Very glad to have you along with me today for what I am sure is going to be a very interesting and productive conversation. As always, we do like this to be a conversation. So if you're watching, whether you are tuning in on Facebook, on LinkedIn, somewhere else, and you have a question, you have a comment, you want to get some information across, well, do it. Post in the comments. I will be on the lookout and I will happily pull your thoughts and your questions and your ideas into this dialogue. But I'm going to start it off today with a question. Would you rather be rich or would you rather be wealthy? And you may be sitting there and thinking, come on, Gene, they're exactly the same things. But in fact, according to my guest today, they are not. He says that knowing the difference between being rich and being wealthy can actually make all the difference when it comes to having a meaningful life, especially as we age. The question is, how do we get there? How do we draw a roadmap to a wealthy life? And once we know what that wealthy life looks like, how do we fund it? To answer those questions and others today, Brian Portnoy is with me. He is the founder of Shaping Wealth, a learning technology company focused on promoting financial well-being. He is also the author of a number of terrific books, including the bestseller, The Geometry of Wealth. Brian, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
What a pleasure. Thank you.
Tell me about the geometry of wealth and the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Because I know there are people out there who are grabbing for their thesauruses or thesauri, however you're supposed to say it, and are like, come on, people, are these not synonyms?
Yes, I do not think that they are synonyms. And I think that the fork in the road between being rich and wealthy is a maybe life-changing event. The way I've been thinking about this over, I dare say, more than a quarter century in the industry is that rich is the search for more money in particular. And what we know from established incredible psychological research is that the quest for more is rarely satisfying because the thing that we want when we get more is even more. To channel one of maybe my favorite TV show of all time, Mad Men, and Don Draper, he says that happiness is that feeling right before you want more happiness. Psychologists have a term for this. It's known as the hedonic treadmill. And no matter how fast you sprint on a treadmill, you don't get any further. The relationship between more money and a more meaningful, happy life is quite limited or tenuous. So rich is one thing, wealthy is the other. And I coined a term many years ago, funded contentment.
Mm-hmm.
Funded contentment is what I think actually all of us really want. It's what I think of in terms of true wealth. And funded contentment is the ability to underwrite a life that is meaningful to you, however you choose to define that, and however you choose to update that through life's ups and downs. So let's think about that for a minute. The ability to underwrite a life that's meaningful to you. With funded contentment, it's a two-step process where one, we ask, well, what is a meaningful life? What is deep contentment? Not good mood, bad mood, not happiness in the yellow smiley face sense, but a deep, meaningful life. And
Yep.
then after we go through that exploration, how can we afford that? How can we underwrite that? It's a very different way of thinking about your finances compared to, oh, I've got X number of dollars, I want 2X.
Well, and I think what's interesting about the way you approach this term, funded contentment, is that you go contentment first, right? You figure out what it actually means to have this life that will bring you contentment. And we're going to break it down because I know enough about your work to know that it has many components. And then you go about the question of, okay, how do I underwrite it or pay for it, essentially?
Hmm.
How do I make sure that there is enough to provide this contentment that I am looking for on a continual basis? So,
Hmm.
so when you think about contentment, what are the, you say it's not a yellow smiley face, it's not good mood, bad mood. What is it?
Yeah, it's a deeper sense that you're living a good life. And, fair to say that, in philosophy, going back to Aristotle, theology, literature, I mean, we've been grappling with what the good life is since we've been a species, right? To me, and there's an old line, many years old, that all models are wrong, but some are useful. Okay.
Okay.
And so I'm going to propose a model for thinking about what a deeply contented life is, with the asterisk that, hey, if you find this to be a useful framework, great, run with it. But you might say, I have a different view. That's cool also. I lean into what I call the four C's, the four sources of contentment. And what are those? Connection, control, competence, and context. Another way of putting that would be your sense of belonging, your sense of autonomy, your sense of mastery in your day to day work, and your broader sense of purpose. But instead of leaning into the acronym BAMP, I decided to go with with the four C's. And, however you want to dive into those, as I, not just as somebody who's been a portfolio manager and a writer in behavioral science and, running a coaching program and things like that, but just being in the world and reading and thinking, it seems like those four sources of contentment do cover the waterfront. And so, with our process or idea of funded contentment, what we want to do first is kind of move through those four C's and say, well, which of these are really important to me at a granular level? And then ask, well, what do they cost? How can I afford these things?
So let's unpack those four C's. And I just have to say, I am not surprised that you went with the four C's instead of BAMP, because you're a guy who quotes Don Draper. So let's just establish that. The first one is connection. This deep need to belong. And I feel like we've been hearing a lot more about the importance of connection in newspapers, in scientific studies. Lately we've got the Surgeon General coming out and saying loneliness is as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We've got Dr. Ruth, who right before she died put the finishing touches on a book that she co-wrote with Allison Gilbert, all about connection. I mean, it's something that feels very much of the moment. When you say connection, what do you mean?
I mean a deep sense of belonging, that you feel connected to others in a way that is visceral and and very real. We are sort of we're born, not sort of. We are born as tribal creatures, not capital T political any of that noise, but small t. We are born into a group and we gain so much from our connection to others at the neurological level, the psychological level, the sociological level. And I'm really glad you brought up the Surgeon General report, because we are being forced to confront one of the great ironies of our day, which is that despite all of this new advance in communication, social media, the types of platforms we're on right now that quote unquote connect us to others, we've actually seen a spike in how disconnected we feel. It's this weird paradox. We've never been more connected. We've never had such a widespread epidemic of loneliness. And I think we're right in the flow of researchers and thinkers trying to figure out why that's true. I think what it does for sure, Gene, is emphasize that at the end of the day, if we feel alone, it's very hard to feel like we're living a good life. Very few of us want to just be walking the earth by ourselves as a solo traveler. If we don't have others in our life, we feel hollow. And so, among the four C's, I would actually put connection as first among equals, because absent that, life feels very empty.
Do these go in order? Is control then second among equals?
Not really. I didn't think through it that much, but I probably did start with connection for that reason. Control's interesting because it's the inverse of connection. It's autonomy, it's independence, freedom. It's the ability to do whatever it is that you want. We know what a good feeling that is, and we know that when we're told that we can't do something, when we're imprisoned formally or informally, that we are deeply constrained, we feel less than. And so, if you think about human history and the quest for freedom and independence, it's not a mistake that that has been sort of the theme, that we are striving for that. So, you know, the contrast, which many of us resolve, but it's out there and it's attention, is that on the one hand, we cherish our tribal loyalties, meaning we lean in with what others are doing. And at the same time, we are fiercely independent as humans and we want to do what we want. There's layers to it. You already know I'm a TV and movie guy. When I think about my favorite movie of all time, Shawshank Redemption, Andy
Hmm.
Dufresne is physically imprisoned but spiritually free. That movie, the theme is the theme of hope, and he never loses hope. And he's able to imagine a life beyond the prison walls. And that's inspirational. So it's not just our physical ability for me to get up from my desk and walk down the hall and have the freedom to do that. It's also the liberty and the opportunity to tell the story about who I am to the world. That is a very meaningful thing. So, control or autonomy is critically important right along with connection.
And when I think about, and we're going to get to the funded part of this equation in a moment, but when I think about control, I mean, my work has really pointed to the importance of having control over your money,
Mhm.
not just being competent with it, which we'll talk about in a second, but being a understanding that we work hard and we have choice and we are able to make some choices that are meaningful to us, whether or not they're meaningful to other people.
When others force their options on you, we feel less than. When we're given a menu of choices and we can choose, this option versus the others, okay, well that feels really good to us. And specifically because this all has such significant ramifications for personal finance. When you have the sense that you control your money versus your money controlling you, that's a good place to be versus the opposite.
100%. Talk about competence. Why is it important when it comes to finding contentment to feel that you are competent at something?
Work helps to define our identity. When we don't have something to attach to, when our jobs aren't meaningful, when we don't have a vocation or a hobby that props us up, we feel less than. And so when I'm doing work, I'm a business owner and I'm building something I'm very proud of, it is a deep source of joy for me. Doesn't mean there aren't daily ups and downs of running a company, but the fact that I can lean in and exercise my craft and elevate my employees, you think about how much meaning we get from doing a good job at something we find valuable. And the tip of the spear of competence or mastery is flow. And we've,
Mhm.
even if you haven't heard the term, we've all experienced flow states. It could be on the job, it could be playing guitar, it could be playing hoops, it could be in any number of things that you're doing, but all of a sudden the world has disappeared and it's 2 hours later and it's like, wow, I was just so in it. That's a very specific neurological state. It's a flow state. It is deeply pleasurable, but not in the yellow smiley face sense, but in the boy, I'm doing something that's really important. It's a whole different topic, but like there's a whole literature or discipline on the importance of play and why the ability to play and have fun is important. That's somewhat connected to this element of competence, mastery, and leaning into something that matters to you. Absent that, you feel a bit lost and
Yeah.
listless, and we want to avoid that.
Yeah, I love the research on flow.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, to me, it's that period where you forgot to eat lunch and you forgot to go to the bathroom, right? It's
Yep.
like you were just so in it that the day flew by. And it's wonderful. And I think the goal is to try to find something that brings you back to it again and again and again. The last C on your list is context. What do you mean?
The big picture, the really big picture. So, do you feel like you are connected to something bigger than yourself? Studies have shown, research has evidence that those who feel connected to something bigger than themselves, I'm not talking about interpersonal tribal stuff. We talked about that in the first C in connection, but in the broader sense of, wow, I'm part of something bigger. I'm living a story that's connected to something bigger. Those folks feel a deeper sense of contentment in their day-to-day lives. And historically, there's been two sources of that broader context. And we can lean into the word purpose, the sense that you have a purpose here in the world. And those are faith and place. And so whether you call it religion or faith or spirituality, having a connection to an idea of how you fit into the broader cosmos is something that humans have been grappling with, experimenting with since the dawn of civilization. And it's very powerful when you have that story that makes sense to you. Absent that, we feel less than. The other pillar is place. It's your hometown pride. It's your patriotism. It's your love of country. Um, those are really, really important. We've talked about this offline. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I moved away from Pittsburgh 1987. I've barely been back, but it's still so definitional of my identity. So this context or purpose element really speaks to who we think we are and our identity. And when you have that strong sense of identity, you feel more than.
When we're talking about funded contentment, at least in the context of this conversation, it gets us to the discussion of retirement. And one of the things that strikes me as we're talking about your four C's is that when you enter retirement, some of your C's will inevitably change, right?
Mhm.
Maybe context for you has been a workplace. Maybe it's been your company. Maybe that is your element of competence as well, and you're shifting out of this world that you know into one that is new and different and maybe amazing, but also maybe a little bit scary. How do you help people deal with that?
There are a few more important life transitions than retirement. Retirement, as you know well, is sort of a new institution. It was for most of human history that you basically either worked until you died or you worked until your family took care of you because you couldn't. So the modern retirement system's a sort of a relatively new social invention. Um, when we go from our work life to our retirement life, we in effect change identities, and things are in motion in terms of how we think about ourselves. So take one of the four C's here: competence, mastery. Hopefully we've built a career over time so that we're doing something that we're really good at and then we enjoy it. And one of the ironies of retirement is that you do your job so well that you could save enough money that you stop doing the one thing that's really important to you. It's
Yes,
maybe a weird way
scares
to frame
scares
it.
the heck out of me, by the way.
Me
Scares
too.
the heck out of me.
Me too. And, I think we're largely blessed by the longevity that we now enjoy as a society. Um, but the fact that, lifespans have expanded so dramatically, and now you might be alive, and not only alive, but well for 30 years in retirement. This wasn't kind of the original idea. In fact, I mean, it's a funny trivial story, but the number 65 was invented in Prussia because the czar basically said, "Hey, we're going to take care of everybody at age 65," but the average lifespan in Prussia at the time was 63. So it wasn't really a system that was designed to take care of people. It was a system that was designed to take care of political problems in the 19th century. In any event, when you retire, everything's in motion. Think about our workplace relationships and friends. Many of
Hmm.
us end up spending more time with our colleagues than we do with our partners or our kids. And so you have that sort of loss. So, this isn't the 4C framework. It's a different framework that, you know better than I do. But the idea of retiring to something as distinct from retiring from something is a very powerful reframing of what we're trying to do, because some elements of those sources of contentment are going to be diminished in the transition to retirement. And a little bit of thought, a little bit of introspection, conversations with a friend or a financial advisor or others can go a long way in bridging the gap in what can be an actually very psychologically traumatic experience. And we do see increases in levels of depression among new retirees who haven't really figured out what they're retiring to versus what they've retired from.
No matter whether or not you've figured out what you're retiring to, and I hope that people will take the step of doing that, you still have to pay for it, as you
Mm-hmm.
have to pay for your pre retirement contentment. Let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about the funded part. Once you've got a sense of the life that these somewhat squishy 4Cs
Yeah, they are squishy.
translates to for you, how do you figure out A, how to pay for it now, but B, how to pay for it on an ongoing basis?
Yeah. So this isn't easy, and the 4Cs, I, in a sense, made them up. I think they're justified by both science and history. But it's an opportunity in the loose sense. Just ask yourself what's important to you, and then we say, well, what do these things cost? And Gene, one of the powerful things we see with our clients, with financial advisors and the end client, is that sometimes the answer is, boy, the things that are most meaningful to me cost nothing. And in other cases, it costs a lot. And it's really on a case by case situation basis. Let's take the first of the four, the connection. You know, Sometimes we find connection through our membership at the club or paying dues at the church or the synagogue. Well, that's a specific dollar amount that we need to accommodate. Maybe, we like to hang out with friends who travel. Travel's a passion of my wife and mine, and easy to think about. Well, you got to pay money, you got to flights and hotels and and food and all the other things. But we know that if we're not traveling with friends, that there might be some diminishment in the contentment that we feel in life. And so as you go through, well, in some generic sense, we all want a sense of belonging, but how is that really landing? How are you connecting to others? In many cases, it's via text or going and having lunch with a friend. It's really doesn't cost anything. In other cases, it could be a lot. Your sense of autonomy or freedom, your ability to do what you want. There's certain sayings that are a little bit profane that I won't use in terms of the type of money that you can tell people to leave you alone. We'll call it leave you alone money. How about that?
That's a very
Leave me alone money.
acceptable term for this
Is that
forum.
acceptable? Okay,
Yes.
so we're going to call it leave me alone money. Um, that's a specific dollar amount depending on your life circumstances, where okay, you're going to live where you want to live, you're going to travel like you want, you're going to do the things that calculating that leave me alone money, where you're expressing your autonomy and your independence, that sense I can do whatever I want whenever I want. you got to get into the weeds a little bit. So, like we've been talking about, it's this two-step process. What's meaningful to you, and what are the financial implications of those conclusions? And we can also appreciate, you talked about the transition to retirement, but one thing I've done, one thing that we do in coaching others is say, well, let's think about your entire life since when you're, say, maybe a teenager, and let's run the four C's across the last 20, 30, 50 years, whatever the time frame is. Well, what people immediately realize is, oh, different elements of a meaningful life have actually evolved and shift. And so you squeeze the balloon here and it bulges there. It's never exactly the same. And so when we bring the financial planning or the personal finance into it, I love this stuff. So maybe not everybody loves it as much as I do, but it's a really cool exercise to go through to figure out what the financial implications are for affording the life that's truly meaningful to you, which is very different than saying, hey, I want to have $2 million by age 65, and at a certain withdrawal rate, that's going to lead to certain cash flow, all, very mechanical thing. What I'm talking about, what we're sharing with each other now, is a very different mindset to that more kind of accounting spreadsheet of approach to being rich versus wealthy.
Before you and I took to the air, we started talking a little bit about annuities, and hearing you talk now, it seems to me that that guarantees that would pay for that life that you know that you want, not the amount in the bank, but the
Hmm.
the I know I have enough money to take a trip to see each of my three sets of grandchildren once a year. I know I
Hmm.
have enough money to pay for the dues to my sailing club. Whatever the thing happens to be, whatever the goal is, I have enough money to support my favorite causes,
Hmm.
or to, I don't know, whatever it
Oh,
is. It would
whatever
seem
it is.
to me that knowing that that amount is locked in is if not key, at least it, attractive.
Oh, it's certainly attractive. I mean, I don't want to kind of overextend the metaphor or the framework too much, but if we think about our hardwired genetic um, interest, desire to be independent, autonomous, make our own choices in life, part of that is putting a premium on certainty. So because it's about controlling your environment. Connection's about, well, you don't control your environment, you're part of the tribe and you go where the tribe goes. Autonomy or control is, well, I'm going to do whatever I want. And so having control over having a sense that, like, this is going to happen, that there is certainty. The human brain, all things equal, craves certainty. We don't, there's a lot to say about this, but we don't love uncertainty. And the human brain subconsciously usually fills in a lot of detail, some of it not really real, to make us feel like we understand something when we actually don't. So the human need or thirst for certainty is, it's not a nice to have, it's just part of who we are. So there are elements there, as we talked about. Annuities aren't my world of expertise. Those are complex solutions. So on the one hand, the certainty feels great. On the other, well, this is complex, I need to figure it out, and you feel a little less in control. So there's really an amazing opportunity for education and dialogue and things like that. But all else equal, you are right. The certainty feels good.
Which sort of brings me to the last road I want to understand, the last portion I want to understand about this work that you're doing, at least for right now, because I got to tell you, Brian, I think it's fascinating, all of it. The the work that you do in your company is with financial advisors, right? Helping financial advisors help clients make decisions that are as much, if not more, about life than they are about money. Why you could have been training life coaches, you could have been training teachers, you could have been training therapists. Why are you training financial advisors?
I love this question, and I've never really been asked it in that way before. So thank you. That's amazing. So our motto or our company vision is funded contentment for everyone. The idea of impacting the world by teaching wealth as a mindset. And so I had some choices along the way as an entrepreneur. I could build a personal finance app and for 99 cents at the Apple store, like, hey, here's some cool things for you to, manage your finances better. I didn't want to do that. I could have been a financial advisor myself, but where I was a few years ago, it was sort of a little too late to start building a book of business. The the third thing that I thought about was, well, why don't I think about the financial advice community? And I've met more than 10,000 advisors over the last decade in my work along different paths. 99 point something percent of them care deeply about the families that they take care of. I think it's a virtuous profession that isn't very well promoted. And so, business decision on my part to effectively use the financial advice world as a platform to spread the word. And so, there's been an important evolution in the planning practice away from hard selling of product to actual financial planning. And now there's elements of coaching and live coaching. And what I wanted to do was to provide a learning platform for the advisor. So we coach the coaches, and I, in a, I think, virtuous way, use them to amplify the message about funded contentment as a mindset.
Amazing. What is next for you on this road?
I'd like to get back to writing, but there's something about running a small business that gets in the way of that. So hopefully there's another book someday, not sometime soon. My team is growing. Our client roster is growing, and we have been lucky to catch a true global industry tailwind where when it comes to what we call human centric or human first advice, meaning truly understanding not just the customer or even the client, but the actual human being sitting across the table or the Zoom screen from you. That is a life's work right there. And as we tell our story, one financial planning firm after another is saying, yes, please. We'd
Mm.
like to train our people using some of your programming. And some of it's free content, some of it's immersive coaching programs, other sorts of experiences in between. So I think what's next is hopefully more of the same, that we kind of ride this inflection point we're seeing in our growth to, build a good business, but I really do want to make a difference.
I think you're definitely doing that. For those people who are watching who'd like more information about you and your company and your work, where would you like them to go?
Yeah, so really straightforward, shapingwealth.com. So that is a clean website that kind of gives you a view into the types of ways that we work with financial advisors all over the world. We have a global clientele tapping into this global phenomenon. And so, shapingwealth.com is the place to come find us.
Fantastic. Thank you for this. This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
I appreciate you.
Absolutely. And for anybody else who's watching who'd like more information from the Alliance, you can and should sign up for our newsletter. It drops every other week on issues related to retirement. And you can find that at protectedincome.org/subscribe. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.